Hello, and welcome to Alienate UK with your hosts, Andy and Nicole. Stickers are now active.
Let's go. Let's go.
Hello, welcome to today's second podcast of the day, but this is a proper one with a proper guest and everything. So thank you for joining us. Our guest today is Trey Hudson. Thank you so much for joining us, Trey. Absolute pleasure to be chatting to you this evening or this afternoon or this morning, depending where you are.
Right.
Yeah. So you've done, I was reading through your bio the other day when you sent it to me, and I've gone through a lot of stuff on your Facebook. You were covering so much stuff. I know using the US Army, I had it up on the screen, but it's gone off. I don't know where it is. And if I start looking for it, I'm going to end up losing stuff. But you've done so much. I know you were saying before that you retired from that, but you were still deep into pretty much what you've always been doing from day one, aren't you, really?
Well, it's one of those things is, I have people tease me, once you're in that kind of business, in the government, intelligence, security, and all of that, you're never really out of it.
Yeah.
I really am out of it. I was read out of all my programs. I was debriefed out of my clearance and all of that.
Yeah.
And, and I tell people that while I learned a lot of skills, in that world that I take over here, that was my job, my job. Researching high strangeness is my vocation. It's what I really love. I'm a little bit older than I look. I was born in 1964, so when kind of the paranormal started coming into, especially here in the U.S., into our culture, through shows like the Twilight Zone and things like that, and then we moved into the 70s, and you had Leonard Nimoy and the wonderful show In Search Of. And all of it just really started percolating in our consciousness. I was like this little sponge as a kid, soaking this maladaptive sponge, just soaking all this stuff in.
Yeah.
And so I've always been interested in it. So now I'm getting to do what I really love, and just as important and enjoyable, researching this stuff, discovering new and unique things, having experiences, is getting to share it with people, because it's a holistic experience. It's experiential, not only for myself, but for the whole world. And that's kind of, the way my team and myself look at it is we want to share this with everybody, where, people can be inspired either to go have their own experiences or live vicariously through ours.
Yeah.
So I was kind of the same way, like with paranormal TV and everything, just kind of soaking everything up. Which show do you think had the most impact on you growing up?
The most impact, probably 3 shows. And like I said, I'm going to show my age here. So just, anybody wants to, Venmo me some money for some Geritol, let's do it. No, I turned 60 this year. So, I'm going to have to go out and shop for walkers and, one-piece jumpsuits to wear around the Walmart. No, I'm kidding. Several shows really, really were touchstones when I was growing up. One was, of course, like I said, Leonard Nimoy in Search Of. And every week he would come on with some just really neat thing, and it was kind of a very holistic show. It wasn't just ghost; it was everything. So he'd do like ghost one time, missing people the next, then Sasquatch, and all of this stuff. And I'm such a geek, I had the entire series on DVD. That just shows you how
Wow.
geeky I am.
Awesome.
And so then there was, and these are, of course, nonfiction shows. Another fiction show was one called Project UFO, which was a kind of a highly dramatized series based on the Air Force's Blue Book studies.
Yeah.
And so every week they would have an episode based on some sort of investigation that these Air Force investigators would go out and do. And but once again, I'm such a geek, I have that entire series on DVD.
Love it.
Yeah.
But the apex, and I'm in good company here, this was the show that inspired Chris Carter, the creator of the X-Files, Millennium, The Lone Gunman, all those wonderful TV shows from the 90s, was a television show called Kolchak the Night Stalker. And he was a hack reporter in Chicago, and played by Daryl Gavin. And he would go as a reporter, and he was always investigating the kind of fringy stuff, much to the chagrin of his editor. And, he was always getting involved in vampires and werewolves and UFOs and, all kinds of things.
Yeah. Anything and everything.
Yeah, a little bit of everything. And so, I really like that show. And that's how my parents would punish me, when I'd been naughty. They said, well, you can't watch, Kolchak the Night Friday.
Wow.
Tantrum.
That was a big deal because you couldn't just DVR it.
Yeah, no, it was a huge deal. And I would, throw a tantrum, hold my breath, pass out, and wake up with a headache. No better than when I started. So, so that's okay. Yeah, I've got a sense of humor. Just bear with me here. Yeah. So anyway, that was, I love that stuff. And so, our school went on a field trip to Washington, D.C. That was kind of a big thing in the 5th grade. And so while all the other kids were, having their parents buy them magazines to keep them occupied, football magazines, which, nothing against American football. I enjoy the sport. But, they were getting football magazines and, rock and roll magazines. I was a lone nerdy kid sitting in the back with a UFO magazine. That was me.
Yeah.
So, I come about it honestly, I suppose.
Yeah. Did you ever watch The Mysterious World of Arthur C. Clarke?
I do not. I'm familiar with it, but
it was just, it used to be on a Sunday evening in the UK, or Sunday afternoon. I know it was always around the time when I was getting prepared to be sent to bed. And it was just fascinating. And I've seen them all, but there's one story that sticks out more than any others. And it was these rocks that used to move across the desert, and they didn't know how they was being shifted. And they'd have like a stone, they'd have like a trail, like a chalk trail behind it where it's cutting across, and they think it was to do with the heat. Now, I don't know if anything was ever found out as to why they was moving or what was shifting them. I couldn't tell you, but it just stuck in my mind.
Yeah, I mean, walking rocks, why not?
Well, yeah.
Have you heard of that, Trey?
Yeah,
the walking rocks? They're so cool.
Yeah, I've got it somewhere in my library back here, several articles on them. And I think I think you're right. I think it had something to do with it raining, getting wet, and then the wind blowing and sliding the rocks.
Yeah.
And then the wind would dry the desert up. I think that was but I remember,
Yeah, it's to do with the weather, but I was about 5 or 6, I think, at the time. So a lot of that memory's just blank now. not a lot of it left.
The temperature dropped, and then it made ice, and they slid on the ice, and then it melted and dried up, and then
Yeah. It was just fascinating at the time.
Oh yeah. And that's kind of that's the cool thing. That's what I like about the kind of the research I've been doing, and why I think it's kind of resonated with so many people is here we are in the 21st century. And, of course, when I was growing up, we had rotary phones, and if any of y'all have ever seen them, you put your finger in and you rotate this big circular plastic thing, and that's how you input the numbers to call. And so, we had rotary phones, one phone per household because you rented them from Ma Bell, AT&T. And, we didn't have DVRs, we didn't have VCRs, we didn't have, video cassettes, anything like that. And if we wanted to research something, like when I was at university, we actually had to go to the library, check out a book, or go to something called the Journal of Periodic Literature. I think that's what it's called. And like look up magazines and get the magazines ordered and sent to you when we were doing research papers.
Yeah.
So, a lot of stuff was a mystery. There were a lot of things that you heard about that you just didn't know. Like if you'd heard about the sliding rocks, the sliding desert rocks, you would actually have to go to the library and research it.
Yeah.
Or maybe just so happened to tune into a TV show or a radio broadcast by luck and listen to some of the explanations and experiences. But here we are in the 21st century. We're carrying these things around. Okay, when I was watching the original series Star Trek, this was a tricorder and a communicator. The fact that we're talking literally on opposite sides of the Atlantic right now, New York, Alabama, and the UK, all tied together simultaneously, is effing magic. Okay. So it's easy for us to think there are no mysteries in the world. There's no questions left unanswered. But the cool thing is there are. And that is why this stuff is so amazing and it resonates with so many people because it's a mystery. And by God, who doesn't love a mystery? Who doesn't love that big question mark out there that makes you go, why or how or who?
Art.
I'm going to do the question now. Yeah.
Yep.
Okay.
So we have a thing where we have a question that we ask all the guests, and Nicole's on one side and I'm on the other. Now and again, we kind of we dip into, we get why we choose opposites and how it can be the attraction from it. So the question is, if you had the opportunity to find out what the phenomena is all about, what the connection is, where it all comes from, where it goes, why it happens, the part that we as humans play in it, absolutely everything, would you like to know?
Yeah, the answer is 42. No, that's Douglas Adams. Would I like to know? Yes. And I'm not going to get into a whole lot of religiosity here, but
no.
In my belief system, I believe there is something after we die. I think human beings are a multidimensional entity. That's how we can remote view and do other things. And we will eventually get that answer. So, yeah, I would think that I would like to know that. I think that my spirit will eventually know that. I'm confident in that. Mm-hmm. And I think you hit on something very important because I do believe it's all related. I don't think we can look at any of this phenomena, in a through a paper towel tube, and narrowing.
Yeah. So can I try and sway you? Because I wouldn't like to know everything, but I believe I have a good reason behind it. Mm-hmm. Because we do this and we go out and we investigate, and I wouldn't really call myself a researcher because I just don't have the time to do it. But I do look at stuff and I try and find things out and see what's going on, see what people are saying, people in the know, like we were saying before about Steve and Barry and Paul, all that kind of, see what they're up to and what their perspective is on everything. But I like the chase, the not knowing, the trying to figure it out, the mystery of it, like we were saying before. And I think once you find out, then for me, a lot of that's gone. There's no... Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, I do.
Yeah.
I hear what you're saying, and I'm going to put a little bit different spin on that. Maybe the other side of the same coin.
Yes.
Is I told you before we came on, I'm going to be whirlwinding all over Europe here at the end of this month. 6 countries in the end of May, or end of April, first part of May.
Yeah.
I know I can pick up a book and I can read about Croatia. That's one of the places I'm going.
Yeah.
I can read about it. I know Croatia exists. I've read about it. I've heard about it. I've spoken to people that have been there. So I have that knowledge. Mm-hmm. But what makes it real is when I experience it. Everything is experiential. And if I know about these other realms, these other dimensions, I also know that there are other entities in these dimensions. And now I know how to experience and communicate with them and learn from them. and maybe they can learn from me. So, you have the knowledge. There's two distinct parts, the knowledge and the experience. Sometimes they go together, but oftentimes they're apart. So I'm a very experiential person. It's just that's the way I was trained in university. So that's kind of the way I look at it. We've had some success with going to places of high strangeness, taking some tools out of the paranormal toolbox, like the Estes method and stuff, and actually communicating. And so now those barriers of communication would be down if I had omnipotent knowledge of everything, and then I could get to really start learning from perhaps a whole other perspective and a multidimensional perspective.
Yeah, see, the way I look at it is, okay, so you know the what? You know that ghosts exist. You know that aliens come from like this galaxy. But then you can ask more questions. You can find out how and why and get into like the philosophical stuff behind it.
Mm-hmm. Right. Yeah. It's
like
it's like I know airplanes exist. I've seen them. They're kind of cool. But when you get in one, it's like, oh, okay, this is now this completes the whole bit of knowledge with experience laid on top of knowledge.
Yeah.
And it's still, when you get in an airplane, it still kind of seems like magic, like you're flying. Like you know how it works, but the experience is different.
Yeah, I'm a scuba diver, so I remember, I knew how it worked. I knew how the equipment worked. I grew up also watching Jacques Cousteau back in the 70s, so I saw him exploring all over the world underwater. But when I was doing my training, I remember putting the regulator in my mouth. This was in a pool, and we went underwater for the first time, and it's like, holy crap, I'm breathing underwater. I'm really breathing underwater.
Yeah.
I'm not supposed to be able to do this. I should be dead now. But because of this technology, I'm able to experience it. And then multiply that exponentially when I actually went out into the open water in the ocean and did it.
Yeah.
Even, more wow. And even to this day, when I dive, when I have a little bit of apprehension before every dive, and when I step off of the boat, hit the water and go under, I still have that same sense of wonderment.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's cool. That is really cool. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Speaking of technology, I kind of want to pick your brain a little bit about AI and your thoughts on it.
Yeah. AI, that's a tough one. We've grown up with a constant diet of fear mongering about AI. Everything from Skynet and the Terminator to cheesy science fiction. Back in the 50s and the 60s, all the way up to very sophisticated science fiction like 2001: A Space Odyssey by Arthur C. Clarke that you just talked about earlier, and Hal taking over the ship Discovery in the film and in the book. So AI, we've actually had the Turing test has been passed. There's actually been a case where a person cannot tell they're speaking to an AI. And there are some experts, and I am not an expert in this by any stretch of the imagination, but there are some people believe that we will reach singularity in 2026, which is when AI is smarter than a human. I read an article I posted on my Facebook page that some chipset design has been turned over to AI. And AI is designing chipsets that computer engineers and electronic engineers don't really even understand why it works, that it's beyond what our engineers can conceive. So, you start getting out into the woo, is AI able to maybe not be constrained by our Euclidean understanding of 3 dimension, and is it thinking into another dimension? And that's where things start getting really weird. And that's kind of the basis of quantum computing. It's not necessarily thinking in another dimension, but it's operating, with outside of our dimension, i.e. quantum entanglement and stuff like that. So it's exciting. I didn't think I'd see it in my lifetime. It looks like I am, for better or worse. Like anything, like George Washington said of fire, he said it can be a faithful servant or a fearful master, one of the two.
Yeah.
So I think we have to be careful. the atom was harnessed originally, when the first self-sustaining reaction was done at the University of Chicago many years ago. And then I grew up as a child in the 80s fearing global oblivion during the Cold
Yeah.
War, so, it's, where do we go? Will calmer heads prevail? I do think it's going to be very interesting that AI is going to be able to gather a whole lot more data a lot quicker and process it at amazing speeds. And we're going to start to see it stick its toe into things like medicine, market analysis, like for stock markets, things like that, and making and possibly turning over decision making to AI, because it can make decisions a whole lot quicker than a human being can, because it can just access so much data so quickly. But the decision points are going to, of course, have to be preloaded by human beings. So, maybe we'll be able to maintain that control. I'm hopefully optimistic. I'll put it like that.
Yeah. So how far advanced do you think we are with AI? I know we're told it's at this level, but with the work and the research that you've done, how far do you think we actually are that we're not being told?
Oh, I think we're much more advanced. I think that here in the UK we have an agency called DARPA, the Defense Advanced Research Projects Agency. And the stuff that you see that they release, the things that they let out from behind the curtain, the stuff they have hidden is incredibly much more advanced than what they let into the public. People don't realize the F-117 stealth fighter was actually flying back in the 70s. It was a operable airframe back in the 70s with the 4450th Combat Group, and that was a classified secret, back then. So as far as AI, I'm sure that they have an extremely advanced AI that's air gapped, from anybody else. It's not hooked up to the internet or anything. It's kept, contained within a mainframe somewhere. And I think it would become a sense of wonderment. I think it would become a sense of awe. It might even become a thing of worship. But it would also possibly be a thing of terror if we really knew.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It does kind of scare me a little bit now that
like ingrained in everything. Like your car has all this self-driving, this AI. That's great until you want to go somewhere that your car says, nope, you can't go there.
So can I just quickly jump in on that? So
sure.
So I drive a van for work, and it had gone in for a service. So I had to use one of the new vans that they had, and it's all light up display. So I'm driving along, going down the motorway, and it's got, come up on the screen, please put both hands on the steering wheel. I'm like, I am. And then I took them off for a second just to see what it would do. Nothing. It's like, a little bit out, but it's like,
that's one of the things I struggle with is, in some of my training, we went over how to break through a roadblock with vehicles, how to hit a vehicle and knock it out of the way, and do stuff like that. And so I'm like, if I'm driving along and I get into a really crazy situation and I want to pit maneuver somebody or break through something, and I get up to it and my car says, "Stop! You're being unsafe. You cannot ram this vehicle," while bullets are flying or whatever. You're not my mom. You can't make me do it. So I think I'm just of that mold that I want to be control of stuff. But I do understand the safety for the 99% of the situations people are going to be in. It is a lot safer. You look at the traffic fatalities of the 70s and 80s to now, things are a lot safer. So I think that, essential safety, giving it up for essential freedom, I don't know. That's a tough one for the philosophers to figure out. But I think, I think it certain things that we were concerned about in the past that aren't going to be an issue in the future. Like, when I was young, you would still hear stories of people living in iron lungs from polio. That's not an issue now. People have never seen an iron lung. A lot of people don't even know what an iron lung is. So I think there are things that, plague us now, like maybe cancer, Alzheimer's, uh,
Yeah.
Things like that, bad disco music, things, we'll push into the past,
Yes.
and, that we'll be living, a very carefree life in our flying cars and, self-cooking replicators and all of that good stuff.
Yeah. Well, yeah, but you said like self-cooking. It's literally we are virtually there with air fryers, with
Oh yeah,
microwaves.
yeah.
You just
Mhm.
put it in, click whatever you want, walk away, leave it, come back, shake it, it's done.
I remember the first microwave I ever saw.
Yeah.
I remember a friend of mine's mom, had received one in her house, and she put a hot dog in, and
Yeah.
cooked it in like 45 seconds. I was like, oh, magic. What is this wizardry you're doing? Witch, burn her at the stake. And, and now there's, like you said, they're so commonplace. And now, with air fryers, that's pretty much all we use to cook anymore,
Yeah.
in my family.
Mhm.
Yeah. We had an air fryer, and within 2 years, it was dead. We had to get a double. So
Wow.
we got a double one last year, I think it was. So you
I
can
love my air
do
fryer.
two lots of magic at the same time.
That's
Mhm.
right.
Yeah. So, but it worked. It's there. But then I know it's going a bit off topic, but with like kitchen utilities like dishwasher, washing machine, tumble dryer, it's doing everything for you.
Mhm.
So could that be the first step into AI?
Yeah, it is. It is. You hear about the thing called IOT,
Yeah.
which is Internet of Things.
Yeah.
Where your refrigerator, all of your consumables have barcodes on them, and when you get
Yes.
low of a certain commodity, it will tell your refrigerator, hey, we're low on soy milk or whatever, whatever,
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
lettuce. And so then on your screen, it'll come up with a list of stuff that you're low on. Now you could even take that further and have that talking to your washing machine, which knows when you're low on washing detergent. And then it could also hook up with a logistics program, like here in the States, we have
Yeah.
Walmart and Target and things like that. And it could go ahead and pre-order this stuff for you. So before you get completely deplete whatever consumable, it's already delivered on your doorstep. So
Yeah.
everything, but then again, we just saw today in the news that there was a secret meeting in China where they have admitted to hacking into U.S. infrastructure and doing some nefarious things. So now, what if we're so reliable on that technology, a state actor or another nefarious entity hacks into and throws the whole system off, and it collapses, before our very eyes.
Mm.
And
Yeah.
and you can get into the whole idea of logistics operations and the just-in-time model of logistics that is the modern way we do logistics, especially for consumer goods, and how fragile that is. And how
Yeah.
easy you can knock over that house of cards and it all comes tumbling down. So I'm the kind of guy that I have a private well, on my property. I have 8
Yep.
acres. I pump my own water. I can power. Now I'm in a little cottage right now on my property. I can power this
Yeah.
completely off the grid. So I'm that guy that's like, well, what if, I've
Yeah.
been
Yep.
without power for, a couple of weeks before with a disaster and it kind of sucked. What can I do to make that easy? So, I think that what people don't realize is, having light and heat and clothes and not having the Mongol hordes, looking to kill you,
Yeah.
that's normal.
Mhm.
Civilization is what's actually abnormal. That is
Yeah.
not the normal state of the world. Chaos is the normal state of the world. And normalcy, as we experience it, is so fragile and it
Mhm.
can go away in the blink of an eye. All we have to do is look at, like we were talking about Croatia, look at, the war in the Balkans in the 90s, how you could have
Yeah. Oh,
a
yeah.
modern city like Sarajevo descend into complete chaos and almost like a medieval type situation in the blink within a few weeks.
Yeah, I read somewhere that you have 3 days in like a off the grid situation
Mhm.
before everybody starts absolutely losing their
Yes.
shit and like attacking other people.
Yeah.
Like that doesn't seem like that long.
No, and we've had that happen here in the U.S. When we had our Hurricane Katrina go through New Orleans, is communications were lost, power was lost, fresh water was lost, command and control of the police department was lost. Everything, it was a world without rule of law, and it quickly went into Mad Max in about 4 days.
Yeah.
But look at what happened during lockdown, and we still had power. We still had water, heat, gas, electric.
You
It
didn't
was
have
just
toilet paper.
or pasta. But that's what I mean. People just lost the plot. I was like, "What are you doing? Why? What?" I still don't understand what the big deal was with toilet roll and pasta. They don't even go hand in hand. No pun intended, but you know what I mean? It's like essentials. You get firelighters, you get bottles of water. Do you know stuff that you need to live on a daily basis?
And as an author, it's something that I have to kind of go into is you mentioned toilet paper is buy books in print. Okay. In print with pages.
There we go.
Don't buy ebooks. And I'm saying that as an author because my print books I get more of a profit off of than I do my ebooks. So, read a book, put money in my pocket, and wipe your butt all at the same time. Do the world a favor.
Yeah.
God bless America.
And then bonus, you have to buy another book.
Then you have to buy another book.
Double the profit. Laughing all the way.
Well, I'm not saying his book was crap, but it did, it did help.
Yeah. It had a double meaning.
That's right.
But it's like you can live without toilet roll. If you're like where I live, there's loads of trees around where I live. You walk to the bottom, you're in the woods, and it's only a couple of square acres, but there's enough. If you need, you could sort yourself out. Put it that way. I'm not going to go into detail.
Yeah.
You don't need that right now, but it's not rocket science, is it?
No,
this conversation has gone completely off.
I know. It's just common sense. It's common sense.
Well, I mean, Laura Ingalls, in Little House on the Prairie, they didn't have toilet paper from Target,
No.
That's true.
So there you go.
There you go.
Yeah.
And the world's such a better place for this conversation.
Yep. AI and toilet paper.
That's right.
Right.
Yeah, we're being killed by Terminators, but we've got toilet paper.
That's fine.
You could wrap yourself up as a mummy and pretend to be some like zombie type cryptid. I don't know.
I don't know. Well, would you get the chip though? The AI chip in your head right now, right this second?
No, I would not. That's a bit of a bridge too far. It's there are texts that talk about having something put into your body that will allow you to buy and sell. And in this book, it talks about that being a very bad thing. So it's like, you got that whole cultural baggage, with that. And then also it's like, I still like to pull out a Benjamin Franklin and, slide it across the counter and, buy whatever it is I need to buy.
Yeah. Yeah. Cause it's like, I've been thinking about this because I was asked about would I take the chip, and I said yeah at first, and then I did a normal person thought about it, and then it was like no, because if these chips work on thought process, you just get an idea that pops into your head. It's like say you're buying something off Amazon. It's like, oh, I could do with getting one, and then you've bought it. It's like, shit, that was like 500 quid. Didn't really want to buy it. I was thinking about buying it, and it's that instantaneous moment of selection where it's just a thought, but then it takes that thought and makes it into that is like final decision. You know
Your
what I
thoughts
mean?
are so wholesome, Andy, because you're thinking, I might accidentally buy something on Amazon, and I'm like, I'm going to think about committing a crime and get arrested.
I
See,
was keeping it light, not too dark.
well, to go down that, kind of that road Nicole, kind of spun off on that exit, is, in China, they have what they call social credit, and people that, behave
Yes.
nicely and say nice things about the Communist Party and all that have a higher social score than naughty people that, don't. And if you have a chipset, in your body or wherever, and you're a naughty person, you can't buy food anymore. You can't buy fuel. You can't leave a certain predetermined area without the authorities being notified.
Yeah.
And that kind of stuff scares me. There's freedom of speech, whether people want to admit it or not, and freedom of thought is under attack, and that's a
Yeah.
horrifying thing. And so that's what worries me, that food and hunger will be used as a weapon. Stalin did it, the Holdar,
Yep.
to the Ukrainians, he used it as a horrible weapon. Holdomar, I think is how it's pronounced, and starved, millions and millions of Ukrainians using food as a weapon. So if
Well,
you want, hungry people
sorry,
don't
go on.
fight back.
Yeah. Well, they kind of do that now when there's conflict going on, usually in the Middle East. They stop the aid workers from getting in. They stop all convoy of food and just necessities.
Right.
Toilet roll, pasta, whatever it is. But they stop it from getting through. They stop the, they drop it down.
Yeah,
I don't
airdrops.
know. Airdrops, that's it. I can't think what it was called. Yeah. So they block everything, or they intercept it, take it, and they use it for themselves rather than giving it to the civilians that are desperate for it.
Well, that's in the olden times when you would besiege a castle, instead of wasting your troops trying to take it, you just cut off food and water until they capitulate.
Yeah.
Well, we just did that with Russia, not food, but like we cut off like Netflix and everything because we were mad at the Russian government. I'm like, that didn't hurt the Russian government, that just hurt the people.
Right. Well, I mean, when Dresden was firebombed, it was hurting the German people. When London was, blitzed, by the V2s and V1 bombs, it's hurting the people. Create as much pain as you can until the government, capitulates, and gives in. So, unfortunately, that's sad. But civilians oftentimes are collateral damage during war.
Yeah. Yeah. It's sanctions, isn't it? That's what they call it, where they cut it off. Yeah. Right. We do have a couple of questions for you.
Yeah,
if that's
sure.
okay.
A lighter one, please. Because we got a little dark there.
Yeah, I mean, it's just kind of heavy.
Yeah. Bit dark web-ish. Right. So, first one is from Sober Carpet, and he's asking, "Hey Trey, have you ever had a case that totally changed the way you thought about a certain phenomena, and if so, why?"
Yeah, probably. Our research in the area called the Meadow. It's so multifaceted. It's an area that has UFOs, Bigfoot, disembodied voices, orbs, all of this stuff, and so I really started looking at things from a multi-faceted perspective. And I've kind of come to the theory that I think all of these things are different aspects of maybe the same phenomena, and that's why there are certain areas. Paul Sinclair talks about Shadowlands and some of the stuff that he in Truth Proof that he's been researching there in the UK. That all of these things seem to be have a geocentric, type of location. That it all happens in a very tight geocentric location.
Yeah.
So I think that looking at things through the lens of a ghost hunter or paranormal researcher, which is kind of where I started, or as a Bigfoot researcher, whatever, and narrowing it so slim, I think you're missing the big picture. I think as researchers and investigators, we have to step back, look at all the phenomena, and be willing to admit that we know less than we think we do, and be willing to borrow the best techniques and the best practices from other disciplines. And that's what we've done, and we've had remarkable success doing that.
Do you find a big connection between like UFO sightings and other aspects of the phenomenon, like Bigfoot, ghosts?
What I tell people is, if you want to find an area of high strangeness to research yourself, is especially now that we have the internet, we can really dig into it a lot deeper than we could here in the past. Is you find a geographical location and go to, here in the States, MUFON, Mutual UFO Network, and look for UFO sightings, and kind of look at the areas where those things are really tightly concentrated. And then go to like BFRO, Bigfoot Research Organization, and look for Bigfoot sightings. And then start digging into the folklore about ghost sightings, folkloric, hauntings of the lady in white and things like that. And you're going to start to see locations where you have multiple phenomena happening in a very narrow area. That's where you put the pin in the map, and that's where you go research, because that is where you have a geolocation, like my location, Skinwalker Ranch, the area that Paul investigates there in the UK, and quite frankly, all over the world. I think there's a lot more of these than people realize. They just have to get out there and do the research.
Yeah. So how many, I know you probably don't know if you'll have a figure on it, but how many would you guess at locations like this that exist that nobody knows nothing about?
Well, that's kind of a loaded question, because I couldn't give you an answer if they're not known.
Well, no, I know. I was trying to word it better, but I couldn't think of another way of saying it.
Like not well known? Like
not well. I think there's a lot out there. I think there's more than people realize. A lot more than people realize.
Yeah, but I was just thinking, like, you've got Skinwalker Ranch, you've got the ranches, you've got Skinwalker, Bradshaw,
Stardust Ranch,
Stardust, and all them. Yeah, so because there's so many, and a lot of them are in quite a close proximity for that part of the US. So if you've got them through the US, imagine how many there are throughout the world. So the locations where we wouldn't even think of going, there must be hundreds of thousands of them.
There are. I mean, if you start, Mothman Prophecies, John Keel, he looked into these things, a lot. You have the Hudson Valley, they're in New York, a lot of strange stuff. You have my mind just went completely blank. It's in Pennsylvania. There's a triangle. It escapes me, but there's another area in Pennsylvania. You have Chestnut Ridge. You have, in Hopkinsville, you have the land between the lakes there in Kentucky. You have, these areas that
Blind Frog Branch. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I talked to, James Keenan and Ryan Skinner are friends of mine, talk to them all the time. And, a lot of the experiences that go on there in Vernal, Utah. And it's not just at Blind Frog and Skinwalker Ranch. There's another area owned by a guy named Ryan Burns, called Space Wolf Research, that has the same phenomena going on. So I think it's very, very common. And the way to really start putting your thumb on this is to look to the folklore and maybe go back and look even later than that. There in the UK, there are areas that have certain something, it's a certain je ne sais quoi that you can't quite put your finger on. People, Glastonbury Tor. Okay, that's an area that is, like, for some reason, that's always been very special for people. Going all the way back to prehistoric. And if you really start digging into that, I think you're going to find out that there are other locations that, have the same kind of phenomena going on. Here in the United States, a lot of your First Nations, Native Americans, talked about this stuff, not only in the eastern part of the country that I'm at, but also in the Southwest, in the Four Corners area, but, all around the world. You have the haunted forest, there in Japan. You have, I have to look up the name of the places. Let's see. You have the the Haku Bachu Forest in Romania. Is one. That's a very strange place. Japan's Okigara Forest. Right there near Mount Fuji. There's these places that have a folkloric and a cultural sense of strangeness to them. So I think they're a lot more common than you think.
Yeah.
So I live in the Hudson Valley.
Oh, do you?
And yeah, I can say that we have so many because I do ghosts. That's my thing. Basically everywhere we go, we can get activity. So I kind of wonder if the activity is location specific, or in certain areas it's just easier for us to, I don't know if we're like tapping into the phenomena, or the phenomena is just easier to manifest in certain areas.
I'll give you a kind of a hypothesis. This is, just my hypothesis, doesn't hold any more water than anybody else's. That there are certain areas that are more fine-tuned and more receptive to high strangeness. And there are ways that we can use technology to detect that. Okay. Let's look at an analogy. Wind. Okay. Wind is more prevalent in some places than others. That's why there were certain naval routes that the sailing ships would use, because the winds were favorable. They used technology, to detect that phenomena, and then how to harness it. So I think it's the same thing with some of these places. There are some places that have this naturally thinning of the veil, okay, a narrowing of dimensions, that information, entities, communications can pass through a lot easier. And with the right research, with the right attitude, and dare I say sometimes with the right equipment, that we can harness that and open up experiences and communications with whatever the other is on the other side. John Keel called them ultra terrestrials. In my first book, I coined a term called paradimensionals. And I think that we can start communicating and interacting with paradimensionals. We've done it. We've started using God helmets, in our research in the field.
Yeah.
To try to really prime the pump, to facilitate communications and foster experiences. So I think, with the right people, the right equipment, and the right location, I think you can really start to make it happen.
Yeah.
Makes sense. Because sometimes we go into places and they have absolutely no history of hauntings or anything,
Right.
and activity.
Yeah.
A lot of places.
Well, then the other side of that is, I think that we have certain people that, whatever it is, I don't know if they find a kindred spirit, or the person, has a greater reception, of phenomena. Their wavelength is maybe a little wider, and they can receive phenomena. But that's something that we've struggled with. Is now we'll have stuff come home with us, like really weird stuff. And what makes it even crazier is I go back and I read about some of the experiences at Skinwalker Ranch and other places, and they've had the same phenomena follow them home. So, maybe sometimes it's the individual. Maybe sometimes it's the perfect storm of location, individual, and technology all together that makes it happen. So, that's something, we're still trying to struggle with now. I know we're kind of at the point now that pretty much wherever we go, we have something happen, even if it's something as, and this is going to sound weird, as common as, disembodied voices, which is not common, but, when you've been in the business for a while, it becomes, pretty routine. So, I think that, people can certainly, be a catalyst, for the phenomena. Absolutely.
Yeah. Like you just saying, but I think it's the right person using the right tools, being in the right place at the right time. I think it's all to do that. It's got to be that connection, I think, because I've been to these places near me that are high activity, and I've been there all day for hours, absolutely nothing. At night, the lot got nothing. Early hours, late at night, through the night, all different times, got nothing. Gone again, and it's like one thing after the other, like non-stop. It's like, but I'm there, and I'm not using the same equipment. I've changed a couple of different things, or I find that if I use less equipment, seem to get a better response. But then I'm not being able to record it because I'm not taking the recording equipment. So it's What do you do?
And that's that balance between experiential and empirical. We try to hit that balance, with our team, and we've missed recording a lot of stuff, but we also have been able to record a lot of stuff. Sometimes, for me, at least in my experience over the years, is sometimes you have to quit fighting the phenomena and just let it happen.
Yeah.
Just let it happen, and just stop being so damn uptight about it.
Yeah.
And, when you've have several years under your belt, going out and, hearing a disembodied voice isn't that big of a deal anymore. Or seeing an orb, or, communicating with whatever, through the SDs or whatever. And sometimes, you just have to kind of go and let it happen. And if you kind of put a personal spin on it, sometimes it's just going out and being there with your friends and people that you care about.
Yeah.
And the phenomena will come to you. We've had some of the most remarkable things happen while we're just goofing around at base camp. We did a CE5 session one time, and had absolutely no activity. And this is with a group of trained remote viewers. Trained in coordinate remote viewing, military remote viewing, and we had nothing go on. But the stuff happened at night, while people were asleep, with things being implanted in their minds, words and phrases that turned out to be quite remarkable later on when we figured out what they meant. So sometimes you just have to let it happen, and just see where it takes you. Isn't that kind of what life is about? Just kind of a Taoist attitude of just kind of go with the flow and just see what happens.
Just wing it.
I find that too. Yeah, like sometimes when we're just joking around and having fun, that's when we get the activity.
Yeah.
So you talked about a little bit before about, the wavelength, having like a longer wavelength. Do you think people can alter their vibrations, so to speak, to be more receptive?
Yeah, I don't know if it's a vibration. Another one of the things I do, I'm an amateur radio operator. And, when you set your tuner to hear a transmission, is you're narrowing the frequency that you're receiving. Now, the frequency to the left and the right of where you have this narrow band, it still exists. Just because you're not hearing it doesn't mean it's not there.
Yeah.
Cosmic rays have always been there. They didn't just pop into existence when we started detecting them. So I think it's the same thing with our, as human beings being able to experience things. There are things that happen outside of our visual acuity. There are things that happen outside of our audible acuity. When we get older, we lose frequencies, that we can hear. There are frequencies that both of you can hear that I cannot because of my age. And I think that there are people through transpersonal, processes, and we have a psychoanalyst, on our team that focuses on transpersonal therapy. So what we try to do is open ourselves up to respond and receive things maybe in a much wider spectrum, to open up that very narrow frequency band and make it much wider so we can receive a lot of things. And since we started doing that, the phenomena has evolved. It's not just disembodied voices. It's not just orbs. Now people are getting things, actually images implanted in their mind. They're actually having precognitive experiences of things that happen later on, like the next day. They'll have a precognitive situation, and then something will happen the next day. So the experience is expanding. It's changing. It's evolving. And quite frankly, takes you in ways that you're not expecting. Now, the other side of that is you have to be receptive to that change. You can't say, well, this doesn't fit my paradigm. This is outside of my normalcy bias. I'm not going to accept it. You have to just sort of go with it and see where it leads you.
Yeah.
I love that. It's like you're training yourself to interact with the phenomena better.
Yes. Yeah. Well, and it's bilateral communications. It's hopefully, now, and this is my theory, is, the place where we research is whatever the other is, the paradimensional is, it's getting more comfortable with us. And the phenomena is changing a little bit, and, we're, like I said, we're doing things like, the Corin helmet or God helmet, to try to kind of prime the pump for these experiences. So to maybe open up the gap a little bit, so we can receive more data, more information, more communications. So we've been quite successful with it, and it's the weird thing is now it's starting to go into the paranormal stuff. Is we actually had an experience where one of our team members was approached by, and this is going to sound hokey, forgive me, the ghost of a deceased team member that he didn't really know that well. This person died before he really became involved with the team, and imparted something to him, that was very meaningful to the rest of us, but didn't really make a whole lot of sense to this this newer team member. So it's like, we're just kind of opening up, all of these possibilities, and now the possibilities are coming to us.
Yeah. So can I ask a question then? So about being open, staying open, and allowing things to come to you when it comes to cleansing. Because for me, if you're going to cleanse, everything you've done, you're just wiping it all away, literally, and you're having to start again. So,
you
get what I mean? It's
the cleansing. We have in our team and the Anomalous Studies and Observation Group people from many different faiths. Okay, we're not, we don't have all the same faith. So people come into the group with different perspectives on that. And for me, and I can only speak because I'm the world's foremost knowledge on my belief system. I'm not, I really can't speak to anybody else's. Is I don't do a cleansing, to sort of speak. I go in with a belief, a very strong belief that through my belief system that there are things that will protect me from negative outcomes, and I really believe that. And I've never had a very negative experience or a very negative outcome. Now, have I been spooked? Absolutely. Have I just wanted to get the heck out of somewhere? Absolutely. But after our experiences out in the meadow, behind my house, I've now found canine prints that are 6 inches in diameter.
Oh,
that look bipedal. Which, if you go back
Andy's language now.
If you go back and you read, skinwalkers at the Pentagon, they were experiencing dogmen after their experiences out at Skinwalker Ranch.
Yes.
And you go and you start looking at like Marley Woods. There are reports of bipedal canines, et cetera, et cetera. Now I'm experiencing that a mere 40 meters from my back door. I'm not worried about that. Okay? I'm not. Here in the U.S., and we're pretty, at least in this part of the country, we're pretty laid back about weapons. I have a 44 Magnum pistol I can take with me when I go outside, but I don't, because I am confident that, my belief system has a mechanism that will protect me from evil outcomes.
Yeah.
And so I think everybody goes into this with their own kind of process on that. And if you're going into this business without some sort of belief system, I strongly suggest you get one, because you really need to have that grounding to be able to move forward in this, with some degree of confidence and self-assurance.
Yeah.
Anecdotally, I find that people who don't think they're going to get attachments or, aren't really worried about it are the people who don't. And the people who are worried and are doing cleansings after every time they go out are the people who do get them.
Manifestation.
Well, and that's another thing is, you can manifest your outcome, and, so I, quite frankly, I just don't worry about it too much. And I think that's another thing. I think if you worry about things, I think you give it energy.
Yeah, you create it. Yeah. But I had this conversation this afternoon, and it was like, so I've had encounters all my life, from early back as being 4 years old up until a couple of weeks ago. So like 48 years, and then whatever bits before that, I don't know. But it's when I've had these encounters, even as being a child, I didn't go running to my parents. I wasn't kicking, screaming, and crying. I wasn't terrified of anything. It was like, I seen this and this happened, and I just kept it to myself. I didn't feel the need to have to go and tell anyone. I didn't feel that it was negative not all positive. It was just, it is what it is. And it's like, oh, well, it's just that's how things are.
Right. Well, and you took ownership of the experience. I think that's a
Yeah.
big part of it. Is it's like, this is my experience. I drive this. I interpret how this experience is, whether it's good or bad or fearful
Yeah.
or not, and you take ownership of it.
Yeah,
And
but like you said about being spooked, I've been in places I could not get out there quick enough, and we just stood, well, sat in the back of the car, like with the boot open, just looking at where we was, and then it's like, yeah, I'm not going back in there for quite a while. I'm gonna leave it for a few weeks before we go back. But nothing bad happened. It was just that horrible gut feeling was, it's time. We need to get out of here now. And I'm not waiting for that second warning, because that second warning ain't going to be as nice as this one.
right. Yeah, and sometimes I think you have to trust your instinct.
Definitely.
That's something I tell people, our team members and guests, is this isn't a tough man competition. If you're not comfortable with somewhere, then leave. Nobody's going to think ill of you. It's nobody's going to put the scarlet W for wimp around your neck. It's it's just, some of us have it. But Andy, since you kind of like the whole dogman thing, I did find the photographs of those prints.
Oh,
like to see. Let's see if I.
Yes, please.
Okay, and to give you an idea, that's an 8-inch scale. I mean, a 6-inch scale. I'm sorry, 6-inch.
That.
Oh wow.
That is like the one that I seen at Bempton when I was saying about, we met up with Paul Sinclair.
Right.
We'd gone to Dane's Dyke during the day. There's me and a couple of people in the chat, Fire Spirit and Simon, and we'd met up there during the day, and we was walking. We'd been down to the beach, and we're coming back up some steps, and it drops back down again, so it's up and down. And as we're coming down the steps, Simon points to this single dog print. You can tell it's a dog because it had the nails, they weren't retracted, so it wasn't a big cat or anything like that. But it was literally the size of my hand.
Mm-hmm.
And that I don't know. I'm not big on dog breeds in the UK.
Right.
But it must have a bull mastiff. I don't even think a bull mastiff would have feet big enough to be that big.
Wolf dog?
So I don't know. But it was kind of a fresh print. So, and we didn't see anyone walking dogs around there. It was in the mud. It was concrete steps going down. It's just a singular print. There's no others around it. There's a lot of mud, a lot of wet dirt. So, clearly, if it had been a dog, dogs are quite, not erratic, but you don't.
You'll like this.
Mean, the way they walk.
This is the track line. Let me see if I can get it. It just begins and ends, and it almost looks bipedal.
Yeah.
And that's a 36-inch rule on the side.
And the thing with dogs don't step in their own prints like cats do. Cats are very select. They know when they, with their first front feet, the front paws, they'll step there. They know it's safe. They follow then with the back feet. I know that because I used to breed cats, but I've studied them as well. And it's one of the things that I know. But I know dogs don't do that. But I know dogs don't do that. So for that to be that and like stop and start, like with the big footprints, it's, why is it just there? Why is it not anywhere else? Is it just showing you or whoever that, look, we exist? I'm going to say them again, showing you without showing you, or telling you without telling you.
And that's kind of the cool part about this is it's a mystery. Why are bipedal canines, not only folklorically significant, going all the way back to werewolves and, that whole mythology. And now, here we are in the 21st century and people once again are experiencing and seeing bipedal canines. Why is that part and parcel of the whole high strangeness experience and phenomena? Why is that? Why is that archetype so important? And, that's one of those mysteries that, quite frankly, I don't know how it really fits. I do know that it happens. I do know that it manifests. It does happen to people that are investigating and researching high strangeness. But what the link is beyond me.
So what is your opinion, like your personal opinion on what dogmen are? Are they like a flesh and blood thing? Interdimensional?
I think it's kind of like Bigfoot, Sasquatch is, I am not totally in the Gigantopithecus big monkey camp. Is I have seen videos, my team has filmed videos where there will be a large hominid. Its body temperature is cooler than the ambient surroundings, which is not possible for a mammal.
Yeah.
When you're there in October at an area and you pick up something on your thermal that's actually colder than the surroundings, that's not a warm-blooded animal.
No.
So why do these things manifest as being colder than the surroundings? How can they manifest and then immediately disappear off of our thermals? So I don't believe that Bigfoot is completely, and this is going to sound wooish, but forgive me, but I think it can come in and out of our reality.
Yeah.
Human beings are multidimensional creatures. We can, like I talked about before, we can do remote viewing. We can do telekinesis. We exist in multiple dimensions other than our three. So is it reasonable to think that maybe these creatures can also exist in other dimensions, and maybe they exist outside of our dimension and just stick their toe in the tepid water of our world, our reality, or is something controlling them and dropping them into our reality and then retracting them just as quick? So
yeah, right. I've found the prints. So I've took 2 stills from a video. So that's the first one.
Yeah.
So you can see how deep it goes down.
Yeah.
And I've managed to get one with part of my foot next to it. So I'm a UK size 9, which is a US size 10.
Right.
So you've just got from the top of my laces down to my toes, and you can just about see the print.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
So it's like more than half my foot.
Right.
That dog print. I don't know. That dog is a big dog, and it's a heavy dog for it to push down. Even my prints were not pushing down that much.
That deep. Well, and Paul talks about, people seeing large canines, out there, around Bimpton. It's well known. So that everything just falls into place. Now, why canines? I have no idea, man. I'm at a loss. Why canines are so special. Other than, you can go back and maybe it's a Jungian archetype. And the canines. Maybe it's a tulpa. Maybe because canines are so important in our culture. In the history of humanity. Maybe that's why these things are manifesting as canines. I mean, that's just a theory. I really don't know.
Yeah. Well, when I met up with Paul, when we met up with Paul in the evening, I sent him that picture, and he's like, "Wow, that's a really good shot." But like I said, it was Simon that pointed it out, and I'm just filming as we're walking. So then that's why I just had to take the screenshots of it. But you can see it's got the nails sticking. Oh, yeah, nails, claws, whatever you call them. You see them sticking out. I know. Like I said before, when cats walk, they retract the claws unless they're gripping onto something. So that is definitely a dog print.
Yeah.
And it's a big dog print. And we don't have wolves we don't have wolves in England, not in the wild anyway.
Right.
But then could it be like the big cats that have been released from like private zoos or have escaped? Could it be something similar to that?
Well, now, in my neck of the woods, we do have big cats. We have cougars and, and I'm not talking about Demi Moore marrying a younger man. I'm talking about real cougars. And, they're around, but, those prints were canine. I've had people look at them and they said, those are definitely canine. So, something, like I said, something about big dogs. I can go back in my library and there are reports of, giant canines, even in the UK, that mystified people, centuries ago. So,
well, aren't they too like one of the supposed alien extraterrestrial types, like Sirius, the dog man comes from there?
Yeah, I mean, you've got as many theories as some people, say that like Bigfoot and Dogmen are controlled by aliens, and they're like organic probes, and the organic probe thing makes sense to me. I mean, that's a self-sustaining probe that can go down to wherever and eat and fuel itself and all makes sense to me. Heck, we just genetically engineered dire wolves, and that was just released this week. So that makes sense. You give these things a little bit of intellect, so they can kind of maybe continue on their mission, autonomously. I don't know. It kind of, if I was a military planner, and designing equipment, that's kind of what I would do. So maybe not. Maybe we're completely missing the boat. Maybe it's so outside of our understanding. It would be like a road being built through a forest, passing by an anthill, and these ants come out one day and they see this road, and they don't know what in the hell a road is.
Yeah.
So they're sitting there just shooting their pheromones out, trying to communicate with the road. And it's so outside of their understanding that they can't even conceptualize. They wouldn't even know what questions to ask, much less, understand an answer. So maybe we're the ants, trying to figure out what this is going on. Maybe it's so alien to us. It's so other that we'll never get the answers until, we pass into that multidimensional realm that we're all eventually headed to, when we pass away. And then maybe we'll start to get some understanding of what's going on.
Yeah. I think we got a bunch of questions, Andy.
We've got a few, yes. So we've got like 15 minutes left to go. This has gone so fast. So,
I know.
All right, quick question from Og, one of the moderators. Trey, your thoughts on Atlantis, please. Where you think it is, etc., and why?
Oh, Atlantis. That's a tough one. I really don't know. And I'm trying to remember, it was first mentioned by, was it Homer? One of the early, authors. And, there's a lot of people that believe that there's, technology that existed prehistory. You go and look at some of the stuff of Graham Hancock. I tend to believe that there was some sort of prehistorical technology that existed. Now, where do I think Atlantis was? It probably, if it did exist, which I don't know if it did or didn't, it probably would not be too far from the coast of one of our current continents. A lot of people believe Bimini is perhaps a good place. Some people believe the megastructures off the coast of Japan might have been another place. Some people say maybe it was even in the Mediterranean and not in the Atlantic at all.
Yeah.
But you go back and you read Fingerprints of the Gods and some of the other stuff that Graham Hancock's put out there. It makes a compelling argument that maybe it wasn't Atlantean technology, but there was some prehistoric technological civilization that existed, and for whatever reason, their history and existence was forgotten in time.
Yeah. No, thank you for that. Next question is from Mark Anderson. He was one of our guests. Was it last week or the week before?
Last week,
yeah. So he would like to know, do you think ley lines are connected to high strangeness?
Oh, that I get that one all the time. Maybe. I will say that there does seem to be, coincidentally, a correlation on latitudes, especially like the 33rd degree, latitude seems to be high strangeness along that. I do understand that correlation is not causality. Okay? Sometimes it's just correlation. So I have to take that with a grain of salt. But, I do think perhaps ley lines, if you're wanting to find some potential areas of high strangeness, maybe looking along a ley line might be a good start. Never hurts.
Yeah. No, thank you for that. Nickname is asking, has Trey ever heard robotic voices?
Yes.
I'm guessing like when you do the EVPs.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. Two things come into play. And this is kind of common, in high strangeness, is these robotic mechanical voices. Back in about 2007, I was starting to do some work and experimentation in instrumental transcommunication. I was using generated allophones, that were randomly generated and put together to responses to direct questions. And about 1:30, about 01:30 one night, my phone rang. I still had a landline, and I picked up the phone, and a mechanical robotic sounding voice came across and said "Gates of Hell," and then disconnected.
That's ominous.
Yeah, but once again, I believe, like I said, I have a belief system that I wasn't spooked by that because I felt like it, was not something that could affect me, and it never did. It never manifested in any way. Then also in the meadow, the area that we're researching now, one of my team members had a very distinctive robotic sounding voice manifest itself about 20 feet above his head and was speaking in a language that he didn't understand. So yes, I have heard mechanical robotic voices or have experienced them. Yes.
Yeah. Thank you for that. This one is from Shelley Montgomery, and she's asking, I'm not a remote viewer, but I don't understand out of nowhere just being shown pieces of things the first time it happened. A man saw me and looked at me, and I don't understand this.
Yeah, remote viewing is, at least the way I was trained, is the military style remote viewing developed by originally the U.S. Army, and then the Defense Intelligence Agency, and later the CIA under Project Stargate. I was trained. I went to a seminar all summer one year and learned to do this. And I think that a trained remote viewer can control this. I think we all have abilities to look through the liminal veil every once in a while. And every once in a while, we get little peeks through it. A trained remote viewer is able actually to control the opening of that liminal veil and actually project their thought and intent through that veil to a specific target. And that's the difference about a remote viewer is we're looking at a specific target with a specific intent in mind. But I do think other people sometimes just stumble across that. You read about this all the time, people saying, I was walking along a trail in the woods, and then I stepped into something that wasn't the normal surroundings for a few seconds. I turned around, took a step back, and then it was gone. People will say I was standing, at this old stately home. I opened up a door, and there were people in period garb holding conversations and having a luncheon. I turned to the docent and said, wow, I'm very happy that there are reenactors there. And the docent says, we don't have any reenactors. So I think every once in a while, people get a glimpse of that liminal veil. And I think that maybe that's what happened to you.
So you think that time slips are more remote viewing than actual time slips?
I think it's all. Well, here's the thing about remote viewing. Is everything that ever existed, does exist, and will exist, all exist right now. And that's not just, I am the Alpha and the Omega. That's not just biblical stuff. That's also quantum mechanics. That's also science. That everything exists now in a quantum state. And what remote viewers do is they're able to punch into that matrix, if you will, and pull data out of it. Remote viewers that are much more skilled than I am can remote view into the future. They can remote view in the past. They can remote view into the present and pull that data out. And anybody that has any doubts about the validity of remote viewing is all you have to do is look at the CIA's own documents, their own documents from the Stanford Research Institute, that this technology and this ability does exist.
Yeah.
And people, they're able to reach into this, this world, if you will, this dimension where everything exists now.
Yeah. Well, I had someone do a remote view on me. I give him the date and location and roughly the year and time of year, and what they come back with. A lot of the stuff they wouldn't have known unless he was there with me. It's like some things I have spoke about on the channel, but a lot of the stuff, it was like you couldn't guess at it. And like you just said, it was past, present, and future. Some of it I didn't understand then, I do now. More of it I still don't understand yet. So I'm guessing that's more future stuff. Because the person that did it printed it off, sent it as a document. So I just did a print myself and laminated it so it doesn't, if it goes missing, I've got a couple of copies of it so I can always refer back to it. But it's like there's no way they would have known unless they were there at them times and them dates in that specific location.
Right. Yeah. That makes sense. It's
it's fascinating.
Yeah, it is. It's amazing stuff.
And the person that did it is actually from Atlanta. which is
Oh wow. Small world.
yeah.
Are his initials LC?
No, it was this female.
Female. Okay, not the same person, but I think I know who you're talking about.
Yeah.
I think she probably works at a certain foundation there. Interesting kind of, you mentioned Atlanta. The Daz Smith, the famous remote viewer there in the UK, I trained under the same guy that trained him.
Ah, okay.
So anyway, kind of a little
cool,
fun fact there.
Cool stuff. Right, got a couple more questions. So I'm just keeping me on the time as well.
Mm-hmm.
So Mark Anderson's put, are you thinking of von Neumann style tech?
I am not familiar with von Neumann other than Newman from Seinfeld. Newman? No, no, I don't. I'm not familiar with von Neumann. Right. So that would be a no. I'm not thinking of it if I don't know what it is.
No worries. Thank you. And then a follow-up question from what Shelley put about the remote viewing.
Mm-hmm.
She's asking, when it happens, should I pay more attention to what I'm being shown?
Yeah, I mean, pay attention to it. You know, sometimes it's applicable to your life and sometimes it isn't. It's like if you're walking down the street and you see somebody trip over the sidewalk, do a face plant, and then a dog runs up and licks their face and runs off. Okay, does that have anything to do with me? Well, maybe or maybe not. If it does, remember it, put some sort of value to it. If not, chalk it up to an interesting experience and move on with your life. You know,
means watch your step.
Means watch your step, and don't let dogs lick you.
Yeah,
don't let dog men lick you.
A dog man lick you.
No. But there has been an account of that happening. A juvenile dog man went into a tent and licked some guy's leg. There's more to it than that. I think it was on Paranormal Roundtable with Josh Turner. I'm sure it was on his podcast, and he's got. You'd have to go back and listen to it, but I just remember that bit of this juvenile dog man licking an arm or a leg of one of the guys that was in the tent.
That sounds like a end of a really good party during my fraternity days at college.
Yeah,
being woken up by licking on the leg. It's just
not for me. Not for me. No. Right. So last question now is back from Mark Anderson. So he's put, in regards to quantum, Trey, have you heard of Travis Taylor using Monte Carlo modeling as a means to determine superposition?
I have not. I think Monte Carlo is a variation of the chaos theory or chaos positioning. And I don't know if that model, is it Monte Carlo using gaming theory. So I'm not real familiar with that. The problem with this, I know I'm familiar with Travis Taylor, is I don't really watch the show. I don't watch The Secret of Skinwalker Ranch. I don't have time.
Oh. I know.
And I went and I talked to some of the cast members, and I said, look, guys, I don't have time. Poor Eric Bard, I think I hurt his feelings. He said, I was talking about radiation spike. He goes, yeah, we're having them too. He goes, we had them on season. I said, Eric, I don't watch the show. I don't have the time. And he just kind of looked at me. And so, what I'm trying to do, and this is one of my biggest wishes, is researchers start sharing their data. I'm not too interested in the stuff that goes on the TV show, but, I'd like for Eric and Brandon to show me their real data. Yeah. So maybe I can start taking some, instead of trial and error on my end, maybe I can use some of the stuff to get right to the meat of it, and vice versa. I can show some of the stuff that works really well for me, and really start helping one another, in our research, because I think it's all connected. I think it's all interrelated.
Yeah.
Yeah, and TV shows always have like a narrative.
Yeah.
And they only show things that fit in their narrative, so you're never really getting the full picture of what's going on.
Drawing the viewers.
It is. It is. When I was on Discovery last year, and that was one of the things the producer explained to me. He goes, look, he goes, don't be too professorial, when you talk. He goes, because we have to keep the audience interested. And he goes, I don't want to use the term dumb things down, because that's not the right term, but we have to keep it relatable to most people. And this stuff can become unrelatable very quickly. So, that's their TV shows. They're there to sell soap and cars and, and whatever,
Yeah.
beer on Sundays. So,
but it's like we had Jim Segala on a few months back, and me and not Mark, but there's a guy called Chris who works with Mark who does Scottish Paranormal podcast. We did a month-long podcast each week on Skinwalker, and so we'd watch season 1, then we'd come on and we'd depict it, we'd talk about it, and we'd give our thoughts of it and what went on via the TV show and what you guys were saying during the filming. So we did that. So week 1 was season 1, week 2 season 2, so on and so on. And then the one that sticks in my mind the most is when the alpacas were attacked in the corral, and they got it on video, and then that was, I think it was episode 1. Then episode 2, they mentioned it, and then that was it. Nothing else was said about it. So I asked Jim about it, and he went, "No, what it was, one of the neighbours, he had some dogs that they'd let out, and that was what attacked the alpacas."
Right.
The directors, producers, and that knew it was them, but obviously they're not going to say anything because it draws a crowd in.
Right.
It's a mystery. It's like, what was it? What caused these injuries to these other animals?
Yeah, and that's that isn't so commercial time, and like I said, I know a couple of the cast members really well from Blind Frog, and what they say is it's not chronological. The stuff happens, it really does, but it has to be kind of put into a narrative that makes sense, and it's not all completely quite the same chronological order, because it might not make sense, it seem kind of choppy to the viewer. And that's the tricky thing about looking at what you see on TV as real search. I don't know if you know Katie Page and the Colorado Ranch outside of Clearview.
Katie was on last week before.
Katie, she's a pretty good friend of mine, and I've actually been to the Clearview Ranch. And she says some of the stuff that you see on Beyond Skinwalker Ranch is just a very narrow sliver of what they actually did and experienced. So, that's the tricky thing about television, and I get it. It's entertainment primarily. And, we have to kind of take it in that vein. I'm not saying, discount everything, but, just kind of realize, it is what it is. It's going to be sexed up, to make things interesting, to keep the viewer tuning in from week to week.
Yeah. Yeah. Definitely.
Sorry, people are getting in my car right now.
No, it's fine, because we have hit the 90-minute mark. So I want to say a massive thank you to Trey for coming on. Absolute pleasure and great talking to you.
Thank you for having me.
Every minute of it.
Hopefully... real quick, Trey, your book.
My first book is The Meadow Project: Explorations into the South Skinwalker Ranch. The second book, I Return to the Meadow: Further Adventures at the South Skinwalker Ranch. Hope to get pre-sale out there maybe the middle part of May, or here pretty soon. We're launching that at the end of May. I hope to have something. I can't go into public right now, but it's something really, really big that'll tie into the book. That's going to be really cool. You can find me at Trey Hudson-author on Facebook. TreyHudsonResearcher.com is my website, and I'm pretty approachable. If you've got anything to say, just jump on board, introduce yourself, and I'll help any way I can.
Thank you, and hopefully you'll come back on when you can talk about the other thing that you've got going on. So
absolutely.
Towards end of summer, beginning of autumn, because obviously you're gonna be traveling and traveling. Traveling.
Yeah, because this could have been a 3-hour show. We could have went on forever.
This could have been a 48-hour show.
Yeah, I'm happy because these experiences aren't mine. They belong to the world, and I'm happy to share it.
No, thank you. Yeah, totally agree with you on that. So, massive thank you, Trey. Thank you, Nicole. Thank you, all the moderators, Og, Nickname, Chiro Sounds, and Midwest Night Watchers. Thank you, everyone in the chat and everyone that helped support the channel. So, we're going to go now. We will be back on Wednesday when we will be joined by Terry Brown, who is Tales of the Voyager. That's his YouTube channel. So have a wonderful weekend, everyone. If you missed the updates earlier on that I did the stream, everything's on there that's going to be happening over the next 2 months. And that, my friends, is it. So have a wonderful weekend, and we'll catch you guys very, very soon. So take care and goodbye. See you all soon. Bye-bye.
If you would like to help to support the channel, you can do this by joining the YouTube membership or Patreon, which both have a number of different tiers, or you can donate via PayPal. Links are in the channel description. This episode will also be available as audio wherever you listen to your podcasts: Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Podbean, etc., as well as being available on Audible. Thanks for watching. See you next time.
Goodbye.